1969 was the end of the most traumatic decade in American history and the beginning of the end of the longest and most controversial war we had ever fought. But, of course, the year was not without a few bright spots as well. The population would finally pass 200 million, and the unemployment rate was less than 3.5%. There was some concern about inflation. The prime interest rate would reach a record-breaking 8.5%. But with just about everyone working, including one woman out of every 3 in the country, the economy was not a major concern. The average working family would earn just about $10,000 in 1969, and with bread at 24 cents a loaf, hamburger at 62 cents a pound, and chicken at 42 cents, that 10 grand could go pretty far. 95% of our homes had television sets in 1969, but what they brought into our living rooms wasn't always entertaining. The daily reports of carnage and violence in Southeast Asia played a major role in shaping our national conscience. And sometimes even caused violence here at home. The first major television event of 1969 was the inauguration of America's 37th president, Richard Milhous Nixon. There was the threat of rain on that January afternoon, but much more frightening was the threat of violence. Police and troopers were everywhere, some 15,000 of them, and so were the demonstrators. And many of them carried peace signs like this one right here, which, of course, was...
Okay, buddy, just move along.
Huh? Not causing any... You don't think that...
I said move it.
All right, all right. But in terms of the 1960s, the incidents were minor. The new president and his party pretended not to notice. It would soon become clear, however, that the youthful protesters of 1969 could not be ignored by the president or by anyone else. In 1969, with a lot of help from television, city streets and college campuses became America's new kind of town hall. The place to air your opinion on just about everything, from A-bombs to zero population growth. But the most vocal and most violent demonstrations concerned civil rights and the war in Vietnam. Led by America's involved and active youth, the demonstrations sometimes became almost as violent as the matters they were protesting. Ironically, perhaps the most violent confrontation of the year concerned nothing more than a vacant lot, and at best had only a tenuous connection to the great moral issues today. It seems that the University of California purchased the lot near the Berkeley campus to build a dormitory. The lot was a gathering place for Berkeley's numerous street people, and when the university tried to claim its property, a battle broke out that would last on and off for over a month. The street people renamed the empty lot People's Park, and they were soon joined by hundreds of students and even some faculty members in the fight to keep it from the university. At its height, the battle spread from the park to the campus to downtown Berkeley. Governor Ronald Reagan declared a state of extreme emergency, called in the National Guard, outlawed student assemblies, and ordered a curfew for Berkeley. People's Park seemed almost forgotten in the battles that ensued. Using fixed bayonets, gas, and birdshot, the guardsmen confronted thousands of brick-throwing students. At one point, a helicopter was called in, spraying the students with the same type of gas then being used against the North Vietnamese army. The battle over People's Park finally resulted in 1 death, hundreds of injuries, and the arrest of nearly 1,000 protesters. Other violent student protests over such issues as the rights of black students and the elimination of compulsory ROTC classes broke out on such campuses as Columbia, Harvard, Cornell, and MIT. At San Francisco State, rioting broke out when President S.I. Hayakawa imposed new restrictions on students in the wake of massive riots at the end of 1968. Some 500 students were arrested.
I want to make it clear to everyone that I'm determined to break up this reign of terror established by the anarchists.
Hayakawa's firm stand gained him national attention. He would later be elected as a U.S. Senator from California. Perhaps even more significant in 1969 were the off-campus demonstrations by literally millions of students and others protesting the costly war in Vietnam. The largest came on October 15th and November 15th, known as Moratorium Days. On the first march, Martin Luther King's widow, Coretta, led thousands of protesters through the streets of Washington. And 1 million others marched in cities across the nation and around the world. Only one relatively minor incident marred the day in Washington when a group of protesters carrying Viet Cong flags tried to enter the White House grounds. Many political leaders of both parties supported the protest, but Vice President Spiro Agnew was outraged. He called the marchers an effete corps of impudent snobs. Of course, Nixon and Agnew weren't the only politicians embroiled in controversy in 1969. One of the most significant concerned Senator Edward Kennedy of Massachusetts. The uproar over what did or did not happen on a small bridge leading to Chappaquiddick Island on Martha's Vineyard would affect Teddy Kennedy's political future, and indeed the political future of the entire nation for over a decade to come. Shortly before midnight on the night of July 18th, while he was returning from a party on the island, Kennedy's black 1967 Oldsmobile plunged from the narrow bridge and sank into the waters of Poocha Pond. Kennedy managed to swim to safety, but his passenger, 28-year-old Mary Jo Kopechne, was drowned. The cold facts don't reflect the uproar the incident touched off.
The car that I was driving.
A few days later, Kennedy went on national television to explain that he had dived several times for the girl but could not find her. Then, saying he was in a state of shock and confusion, he returned to his hotel and didn't report the accident until the next morning.
I remember thinking as the cold water rushed in around my head that I was for certain drowning. Then water entered my lungs and I actually felt the sensation of drowning. But somehow I struggled to the surface alive. I made immediate and repeated efforts to save Mary Jo by diving into the strong and murky current, but succeeded only in increasing my state of utter exhaustion and alarm.
The only formal charge made against Kennedy was failure to report an accident. He pleaded guilty and received a suspended sentence. Kennedy had been virtually assured of the Democratic nomination for president in 1972. But when the time came, with Chappaquiddick still haunting him, he would withdraw from the race. The death of Mary Jo Kopechne was not the only one to shock the nation in 1969. General of the Army Dwight David Eisenhower, the nation's 34th president, died in Washington at the age of 78. It was Eisenhower who chose Richard Nixon as his running mate in 1952 and, sometimes reluctantly, helped to guide Nixon's political career. Another victim in 1969 was 47-year-old Judy Garland, who 30 years earlier stole America's heart when she sang Over the Rainbow in the movie Wizard of Oz. The official cause of death was an accidental overdose of Seconal. Perhaps no deaths in 1969 shocked America as much as the results of a two-day murder spree carried out by a 32-year-old drifter named Charles Manson and a band of followers he called his family. The first set of victims included beautiful movie actress Sharon Tate, wife of film director Roman Polanski. Miss Tate, who was 8 months pregnant, was tied to a beam on the ceiling of her home in the Hollywood Hills and stabbed 7 times and shot once. The 4 other victims, who included coffee heiress Abigail Folger and society hairdresser Jay Sebring, were also repeatedly stabbed and beaten and shot. The next night, a man and wife in another section of Los Angeles were also murdered by Manson and his family. Manson would later testify that the victims were all chosen by chance, that he didn't know any of them, but just wanted to commit a crime that would shock the world. Violent death seemed to be everywhere in 1969. The worst assault came in August under the misleadingly benign name of Camille, possibly the most destructive hurricane ever recorded in America. Camille roared across Mississippi and Louisiana and Alabama, with winds of nearly 200 miles an hour, crushing everything that stood in its way. Further north, 20-foot flood tides were sent raging through Virginia and West Virginia. But when the winds finally passed, some 400 dead were left in its wake, and 70,000 others were left homeless. The damage would reach $1.5 billion. It seems clear that 1969 was not America's happiest year, and yet there was still hope.
Hiya. My name is Kermit, and Gordon has asked me to say a word or two in behalf of the letter W. Now, this is a letter W, by the way. It is a easy letter to make. It's made with all straight lines. And you need a W to make such words as wash, and woman, and weeping willow, and, I'm sorry, there was some sort of mistake here. I thought I was supposed to talk about W, but they sent me an N here instead.
A delightful television program called Sesame Street became a surprise sensation. Produced by the Children's Television Workshop for the Public Broadcasting Service, Sesame Street was aimed at an audience of preschoolers. But its characters, with names like Big Bird and the Cookie Monster, soon became national heroes.
Gilbert, Gilbert, that there are two of us, you and me. Did you ever think of that? You and me, that makes two. Oh, I love the number two.
Ernie, it's just a little movie about the number two.
Yes, wasn't it beautiful, little bird?
Ernie, that's all it was. The world must go on.
The program was presented in such an intelligent and entertaining manner that the kids couldn't tear their parents away from the TV set. Veni, vidi, vici, boasted Julius Caesar after one of his victories. I came, I saw, I conquered. But in 1969, the cry became mini, midi, maxi, as 10 million American women came and saw and were conquered by fashion fads called the mini skirt, the midi skirt, and the maxi skirt. The names are self-explanatory, and so is the appeal.
Lovely as a summer day, my Sherry Amor, distant as the Milky Way. My Sherry Amor, pretty little one that I adore. You're the only girl my heart beats for. I wish you were mine. Legs are here.
A more enduring fashion contribution was the mass acceptance of something called pantyhose. The total female population of the United States in 1969 was 103 million.
Baggy knees are out. Definitely out.
And among them, they bought 624 million pair of the new one-piece hosiery. According to usually reliable sources, the main attraction was that pantyhose freed women from grappling with all sorts of belts and hooks and straps needed to keep the old-style stockings from ending up about their ankles.
They fit. All of me.
Our legs fit your legs. Get your first pair of legs at the Legs Boutique today. Stockings, 89 cents. Regular and all sheer pantyhose from $1.39.
A man who would one day make big bucks selling pantyhose on TV was the star of what may have been 1969's biggest sports story. Joe Willie Namath, quarterback of the lowly New York Jets, led his team to Super Bowl III.
This magic moment, so different and so new and like any other. I'm still I kiss you, and then it.
Of course, the Jets still didn't have a chance. The bookmakers had the Baltimore Colts as 18-point favorites, but that didn't bother the confident Mr. Namath. We're going to win, Joe boasted a couple of days before the game. I guarantee it. And somehow, the Jets did just that. Scoring the biggest upset in Super Bowl history, Namath led his team to a 16-7 victory.
This magic moment,
And if the biggest sports story wasn't the Jets, it had to be the Mets. The New York baseball team was even lowlier than the football team. But new manager Gil Hodges somehow got players like Tom Seaver and Jerry Koosman and Cleon Jones and Ron Swoboda and Tommy Agee to start playing winning baseball. The odds were 100 to 1 against them. But in October, the Mets found themselves in the World Series. And, as with the Super Bowl, it was New York against Baltimore. And once again, the New York team would do it. After losing the first game, the National League Mets took 4 straight from the American League Orioles to become the champions of big league baseball. The ticker tape parade given for the amazing Mets is said to rival that given to Charles Lindbergh after his solo flight to Paris in 1927. No one in 1969 would fly higher, faster, or farther than 3 Americans named Neil Armstrong, Edwin Aldrin, and Michael Collins. On July 16th, on a space flight called Apollo 11, the men took off on a mission that would make one of mankind's oldest dreams come true. They would reach the moon, point the way toward the stars above. On the morning of July 20th, Armstrong and Aldrin slipped into a spidery landing craft called the Eagle and left the main spacecraft for the final voyage to the moon's surface, a place they called Tranquility Base.
We're now in the approach phase, everything looking good. 1201. 1201. Roger, 1201 alarm. We're go. Same tide. We're go. 700 feet, 21 down. Lights on. Eagle looking great. You're go. Forward. Forward. 30 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drifting to the right a little. Contact light. Post control, both autos. Eastern engine command override off. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
A little over 6 hours later, after resting and checking their equipment, Armstrong emerged from the Eagle.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
"19 minutes later, Buzz Aldrin joined Armstrong and planted the American flag on the moon's surface. Buzz Aldrin was a man whose life was filled with big moments. He graduated 3rd in his class from West Point, won a doctorate at MIT, and in between he flew 66 combat missions over Korea. What could possibly top this? Dr. Aldrin, What emotion went through you when you first heard the words, Buzz, you're going?
Well, I think it's always one of anxiety or apprehension, but not really at all, in my case, based on the mission itself, but it's the things that come by doing a significant thing that thrust a person into the public eye.
All of the, what you might call the limelight.
Yeah, right, and that really exacted quite a toll on me, and I had an idea that it might be uncomfortable from the flight that I had flown in the Gemini program.
Most people would think your first reaction would be, oh my God, what if I don't get back? What if it blows up? What if we never blast off, right?
Well, those are kind of jazzy questions to think, but we've been in dangerous situations in combat and flying experimental aircraft, and when you go through pilot training, if those things make you uncomfortable, you find another job, you do something else.
But let's hear your comment on how this whole big adventure changed your life.
Well, the intense concentration on that particular mission in my situation didn't leave me the opportunity to think very much what I was going to do afterward. So there was a big void afterward, and the anxieties and whatever of the limelight, as you say, really didn't sit too well on me, and it brought me to grips with some problems in my life.
You've been admirably frank, especially in your book, about how psychiatric problems were apparently enhanced by this, or maybe stimulated by it. Do you think they give enough attention to the astronaut's psychic well-being as much as his physical well-being?
Well, I think so. You're looking at a person in an early stage of his life and trying to make some predictions. When I wrote a book about my experiences, it looked like depression and psychiatric things might have been the problem, but it was just the evolving stages of alcoholism, which have really, in the recovery in the last 6 years, and more particularly 3 or the last couple of years, has brought about really a new lifestyle for me, and opened up just tremendous opportunities of awareness and abilities to be comfortable or to accept situations the way they are.
Were you alcoholic when you were in the space program?
I think I was probably born that way. I think I inherited a good bit of it, and just the lifestyle of a very perfectionist, competitive, hard-driving youngster, achieving, looking for something that would give me a sense maybe of belonging, because maybe I felt uncomfortable where I was before. And each new plateau that one gains didn't seem to be the answer. And now I have a degree of serenity that isn't a plateau, it's just doing what I want to do, and it's very pleasant.
Everybody knows we spent billions of dollars on the space program. What did we get for that?
More than our money's worth.
Was it worth it?
It was probably the best bargain that this country's ever had.
When you stand on the moon and look back, can you see full Earth and half Earth and crescent Earth?
Yes.
You can?
Yes, and that depends on what time of the month you might have gone. But of course, if you stand on the moon and you stand there for a long period of time, the Earth does not move, because the same side of the moon faces the Earth. The Earth appears in the same location in the sky, and it stays there.
So the Earth never rises?
No, it's
from the moon.
It stays in the same place in the sky. Come on over this way and I'll show you.
Oh, okay. Over here? Aha!
You see what I mean?
Yeah. I love what they've done with the old place. Did it ever occur to you, even for a moment, that they might take off and leave you behind on the moon?
Well, not really. But, you know, come to think of it, as an Air Force man on the first mission, the one following us was a Navy crew, so I might have been in deep trouble.
The odds against... Hope you brought the chessboard. If the 60s was the decade of space, it was also the decade of youth. And just 4 weeks after the climactic space flight, the youth of America reached a high point of their own. Some 400,000 of them, nearly all between the ages of 15 and 25, met on a New York dairy farm near the town of Woodstock for a concert that remains a legend. To the amazement of the world, there was no violence, just an awesome traffic jam, and rain, and sex, and love, and drugs, and best of all, 60 solid hours of music.
Clap your hands, 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 yeah, clap your hands.
The lake at Woodstock became the world's largest unisex bathtub. It was all part of the good times. In a year of hate and violence, Woodstock became a symbol of peace and love. With the end of 1969, we had come to the closing of one of the most violent decades in our history. And with the nation now standing on the brink of the 1970s, most people looked upon the immediate future with a great deal of concern and even outright fear. And yet, with the memory of the peaceful gathering at Woodstock still fresh, at least a few Americans began to believe that there might be room for hope after all. For Yesteryear, I'm Dick Cavett.
Yesteryear is gone, and life must carry on. Yesteryear is gone, and we must find our way. Inspire me with your history, because history will help us find our way. Inspire me with your history, because history